Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And we are going to be getting into the second half of the game preview / start-sit decisions. And we're going to kick off this episode with the Minnesota Vikings versus the New York Giants. The Vikings are favored by 1.5. The over-under is 41.5, so not a huge total here. The quarterbacks here, right? You have Sam Darnold versus Daniel Jones, and even in SuperFlex, these guys are bench quarterbacks. You're not looking to start either of these guys in this game, and I think that's probably the easiest call, maybe other than the Carolina and Saints game that you have at quarterback. Just take a wait and see approach from these guys on your bench, even in SuperFlex.
Yeah, I have slight optimism for Darnold in Superflex season long. I mean, if O'Connell's as good of a play caller as we all think he is, and they design that offense really well, I think he could have some value, especially with his ability to rush a little bit. But yeah, for week one, even against New York, no.
Yeah, I think that's an easy call. For the running backs, you're likely starting Aaron Jones. There might be a situation where he fell quite a bit, and you ended up getting him as like a great value at RB25, and he doesn't quite fit into your 2 wide receiver with 1 flex starting lineups. But for the most part, you want to start him when he's healthy, when he's on the field. He was awesome at the end of last year, over 100 scrimmage yards in 5 straight to end the year, including the playoffs. And he appears healthy coming into the year here, so I do have high hopes for him to start the year. And then if you did go 0 or hero RB and you waited very, very long, you have deep rosters and you got Devin Singletary kind of as your RB2 or as a possible flex play, I could see using him here in this situation in a game where they should be able to kind of grind it out, maybe try and keep the score low, and he's getting a lot of volume in this game.
Yeah, they've talked a lot about his volume and how the offense is likely in a way going to run through him. So I think he's a fine start. And like you mentioned, with guys that waited and loaded up at receiver or other positions, I think he's in a good spot here.
Yep. And wide receiver, obviously you're starting Justin Jefferson. You're likely starting Malik Nabers based on where you got him. I don't have him anywhere. I think I was very vocal about the fact that I just don't trust Daniel Jones in this offense to get him the ball enough. But if you draft him as a starter, you're going to be playing him. I saw him get pushed up into the 3rd round. You're likely in those situations, you're obviously starting him. So that's my take on Nabers. And then everybody else in this game, I think, again, take a wait and see approach. I wouldn't be starting Jordan Addison this week.
No, I have Jefferson in 2 leagues, so very excited to see how he looks with Darnold. With Nabers, unfortunately, I did not get him on any of my teams just because he was getting pushed up so much. And in ESPN specifically, usually they don't like rookies, but for whatever reason, they were just pushing him so high up the board that I wasn't able to do it. But I will say, I like Nabers in this matchup just on his ability to break away and score potentially from anywhere on the field against that Minnesota secondary. So excited to watch him this week. And yeah, no other receivers that I'd be starting in this game.
Yeah, and so on Jefferson too, I'd be getting pretty excited about watching him too. I know this week in practice, there was a highlight that came out that Darnold was able to kind of move around in the pocket and hit him for like a 50-yard touchdown with the safety closing on him. So Jefferson was all hyped. But yeah, I think that there might be a solid connection developing there, and that he could be in for a good year, despite getting pushed down in the 1st round. All right, the next game we're going to get into here is the Raiders versus the Chargers. The Chargers are 3-point favorites here, so they better absolutely crush the Raiders this week. 40.5 points, very, very low over-under, but I think that's to be expected with Harbaugh and Roman. With the Chargers, they're going to be trying to play ball control. The Raiders also trying to do the same thing, the ground and pound approach. So the quarterbacks, you're definitely not starting Minshew anywhere. If you have him, hopefully he does okay in this game. You can get some confidence about possibly starting him as a streamer or in better matchups, or when the over-under is going to be higher, when they're going to be trailing and they're going to have to be throwing a lot, but not this week. And then in Superflex, you should be starting Justin Herbert. I would also be comfortable starting him in a 1-quarterback league if you waited all the way until the end of your draft to grab quarterbacks. I do think that he could be a solid start this week. We did talk about him as a trade target in Superflex too, specifically. And so, make sure you check in on him if you do get a conversation going and there seems to be some interest in possibly trading him, and then he doesn't have a good week 1 against the Raiders, or if they lose the game and he doesn't do very well, I think that you would have a better chance if you initiate your conversation now.
And I would say you have a better chance if they win this game and grind it out on the ground, because then you can tell your opponent, like, or I'm sorry, your league mate, and be like, hey, look, this is the style of football they're going to play. He's not going to throw it that much. And he can be a smash start in games that, they're going to be trailing.
From the running back perspective, if you have Zamir White on your team, you're likely going to be starting him. But there is a situation where he went as like running back 25 in your league, and maybe he was your first or second bench player. So I could understand if you don't necessarily have him to use this week, but against the Chargers, there is a chance that the up front for the Chargers, the run defense just has not been very good the past couple of years for the Chargers. So Zamir could eat on the ground this week.
Looking at, the Chargers running backs, Gus Bus, I think, is a fringe starter. We can easily see him score a touchdown. I'm curious to see how much J.K. Dobbins mixes in, because he's kind of one of those guys we've talked about previously as a potential lotto ticket. Like, if he looks as good as we've seen him look in the past, and that offense runs through him, he's definitely going to be a hot waiver wire ad early in the season.
Yeah, and they're listed as co-running back ones too, co-starters. So I think that's going to be an interesting development. I did draft Dobbins in our home league, and I ran out of bench space. I really thought it was important for me to get Ty Chandler because I had Aaron Jones, just to see how that backfield plays out, and that's for one of my starting spots. So I did cut Dobbins, but I might come to regret that if it does look like Aaron Jones is going to be the guy, and it also looks like Dobbins is going to be the guy if he's healthy. So I could see Dobbins stepping in and playing a valuable role here for the Chargers. For the wide receivers, you're definitely starting Davante Adams. Don't need to get into that very much more. And then you're probably not starting any Chargers wide receivers. Ladd and Palmer both drafted as bench guys, and so I don't think you're going to have to start either. If you do, I would prefer Ladd over Palmer.
Yeah, very excited to see how this shakes out, but don't start those guys yet. Very high on Ladd this year specifically. Just want to see it on the field first.
Yeah, agreed. And then from a tight end perspective, again, nobody on the Chargers. But if you did draft Bowers, there is a chance you drafted him as tight end 9, tight end 10 as your starter. And if you did, again, not going to the waiver wire. So if you made a plan for week 1 and you started somebody else, or you drafted somebody else to start for week 1, and you just want to take a look at Bowers, you can do that. But otherwise, I just would go ahead and start. All right, next game up, Denver versus Seattle. Seattle is a heavy favorite in this game, 6-point favorite, 41.5 over under. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I might take Denver in the points there. I think that the offense might be better than expected. I do think Denver could have a good showing here. I don't think it's going to translate into starting Bo Nix or anything like that, even in SuperFlex. I do like Geno. I think, there's the Denver offense or Denver defense. I don't think is going to be as good as it has been historically. So I think in SuperFlex, if you waited on quarterback a long time, this is another guy that I think I would play over Kirk Cousins, for example, this week.
Very excited to see Geno in that new offense this year.
All right, and then from the running back perspective, you have Javonte. I think he's going to be a good start against Seattle this week, in full PPR especially. I think, we know the Peyton offense loves to target their running backs. And I do expect Javonte will have a very high snap share. I think he's going to play a lot on early downs. I think they're going to make a point to get him involved in the passing game. Then obviously you're starting Kenneth Walker. There's no question there. Denver defense was one of the worst against the run last year, especially early in the season. So, I think he's going to be able to take advantage of this defense in a big way. A big storyline with Walker is that this coaching staff has actually liked him more in the passing game than maybe some of the other coaching staffs he's played with, even the guys that drafted him. So if he is getting a bunch of targets, we could immediately see a flip switch between, having him be around running back, 15 to 20 to being consistently in the top 10 if he's going to get 3-4 targets a game.
Yeah.
And then the last guy, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I'm very excited about Walker this year. I got him in our league. I wasn't expecting to take a running back in that spot, but he kind of just fell to me, and the value was too good to pass up. And I know we didn't do kind of like a bold prediction show, but I think Walker, there's a path to being a top 5 running back this year just with his talent, and if he does increase his passing game work. I'm not booking that, but it's just something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and he can definitely hit a home run, right? So on the ground, there's no question about his talent. The path to the top 5 is the offense is better than we think. He gets a major workload on the ground, and then he also gets that 3-4 targets a game. That would be an unbelievable setup for him, and he kind of takes full control of the backfield away from Zach Charbonnet. And then the last guy at running back, there has been a lot of discussion around going and picking up this guy, Jaleel McLaughlin. I do think that he is going to get a passing game role. I just don't know how much he's going to be involved on the ground. So if he gets 5 carries and 4 targets, I don't know that that's going to be somebody that you can start. But if it does change, or he does get a little bit more involved on the ground than we expect, he could find his way into a bye week starter. I will say I do play in Guillotine League, and there's 18 teams, and he is our last flex spot in that league. So I say don't start him, but if you do play in a setup like that, I could see as like a floor play, as somebody who can get you 5 points, I think that could be okay. Because I have some guys on my team that I like very much think are going to get 0. So, at least we have confidence he's going to be out there on the field. He should get about a 35 to 40% target share of the backfield.
Yeah, and he was kind of one of the darlings of the fantasy community this offseason. And if you drafted him and you believe in him, he's not someone that you need to start right away anyways. So if he takes over as a major contributor in this offense, that's great for you guys, and can start him in a different week, but not week 1.
Exactly. And then there's no tight ends here to start. So next game we'll get into is Dallas at Cleveland. There's a 2.5 point favorite over under 40.5. Again, another really low scoring affair here. Both very good defenses. At quarterback, you're likely going to be starting Dak, especially in SuperFlex, right? You drafted him to be your number 1 starter. You probably drafted him in the top 10 quarterbacks. You're definitely going to be starting him. In a 1 quarterback league, I could see going in a different direction if you drafted Jared Goff late, right? And I would definitely play Jared Goff over Dak this week if you had the option. And then from the Cleveland perspective, Watson, maybe you got him as your number 2 and you have to start him here. But if you got him as your number 3, I would kind of keep him on your bench.
We'll see what happens with Watson. He's put in a very good position to succeed this year. They added some offensive weapons. He's got that rushing upside, but I want to see it first if I can.
At running back, Jerome Ford, you should be starting him. You likely got him really late. And so if you got him as RB40 or RB35, it's going to be kind of hard to get him into your lineup. But my opinion is you drafted him to play him early in the season. So if you can get him into your lineup, I do expect him to handle a big workload here, including some passing game work as well. So especially if you went hero or 0 RB, it was a very popular pick for that build, and I expect to see him on a lot of starting lineups. Again, in Guillotine, I drafted him as the number 2 running back, so gonna have him and hope that he does very well to start the year. From Dallas's backfield, you're not starting any of these guys until you see it. If you want to put Zeke Elliott out there and risk it, and then have Dowdle go off, or you want to put Dowdle out there and then have Zeke end up getting 15 touches, you're just setting yourself up for a major disappointment when we don't know yet. After week 1, we should get a much better picture of what they have in mind in the backfield. And if it's Dowdle, you can start him with a little bit more confidence. If it's with Zeke, you can start him with a little more confidence, and you don't necessarily have to risk taking a 0.
I think we both share the same sentiment that we like Dowdle as a late round pick, and I got him in one of my leagues, and I'm excited about that because if he does take over as that true number 1, we know that offense is pass first, but we also know that offense will be humming, especially in games that are at home that they're favored in. We've seen Dallas just rack up so many points. So I'm excited for him long term, but not starting him week 1. And I hope Zeke doesn't just take a bunch of touches, man. I think he's washed, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, same. I mean, he's so many games with 2 and 3 yards per touch last year, and it's just, I don't know. He was playing for New England, and they didn't really have much going at that point. So hopefully Zeke is more backup to Dowdle, but again, we'll see how that plays out. The wide receivers and tight ends in this game are easy. Start CD, start Amari, sit Judy, start Ferguson, and start Njoku. Right, like that's pretty straightforward here. So we'll wrap that part of it up pretty quick. So going into the next game, we got Washington at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a 3.5 point favorite, 43.5 over under. I do like the quarterbacks in this game, right? I did mention Baker, that I would play him over Dak, and I think Baker is set up in a very good spot for this week against a very poor Washington secondary. And Jaden Daniels, obviously, against Tampa Bay, should be able to have a very high upside week. A lot of rushing, I think we're going to be expecting to see from him. So in 1 quarterback leagues, I think Daniels, you drafted him to be a starter. You're going to be locking him in. If you drafted him as your QB2 and SuperFlex, he's locked in this week. Very good matchup. And again, I think Baker is a play in both formats as well. If you weighted on quarterback. Obviously not pushing Baker up into the top 10 or anything like that. I'd definitely still go with Jordan Love. I'd definitely go with Kyler. But if you did end up with Dak and Baker was your second quarterback, I think I'd go with Baker this week.
Yeah, I think Baker could just go off this week, especially at home.
Yep. And then the running backs, again, pretty simple here. You're definitely going to be starting White. I think I decided to take Kamara over White in a league, and then now I'm seeing White show up all kinds of top 10 for this week. I've seen him push all the way up to 6. Like our buddy Sal has him up at 6, and I'm just looking at it like, oh gosh, I'm taking White. So definitely starting him. And then on Washington's side, I wouldn't start Brian Robinson or Eckler this week, similar to what we've been talking about with some of the other backfields. You want to see how this is going to play out first before being disappointed or let down. My opinion is that if you did have to start one of these guys, or you do have Brian Robinson on your team and you have to start him, say you have Chase, and you're struggling at flex, I could see Brian Robinson is the one that I would want to start.
Yeah, I agree with that, but not starting either if I don't have to.
Nope. And then at wide receiver, you're starting Terry McLaurin, you're starting Evans, you're starting Godwin. There's really not much else to talk about, right? I mean, there's some dart throws with Washington, Luke McCaffrey, Noah Brown, and then Jalen McMillan, I'm sorry, for Tampa Bay, right? Could be interesting, but you're just starting the main guys here.
Yeah, smash start for all three of those guys.
Yes, definitely make sure. And Godwin's another guy that you might have drafted outside of your 2 wide receiver flex leagues. He might be on your bench. This is the week you want to try and get him into your lineup. He could be in for a major week, especially going back into the slot. No tight ends there. Right. Don't get cute with Otten. Don't get cute with Sinat. Don't get cute with Ertz. Ertz might get a lot of targets. Don't play any of those guys.
Yeah.
All right, going to the next game, we got Rams at Lions. The Lions are a 3.5-point favorite here, 50.5 over under. This is going to be the game of the week, I think, for fantasy purposes. You definitely want to start both of these guys in Superflex, Goff and Stafford. We talked a lot about Goff over some of the guys that you maybe would have drafted over him. Obviously, revenge games for both quarterbacks, too, so that might be feeding this over-under and feeding the narrative a little bit more, too. In one quarterback leagues, I would still try and get both of these guys into your lineup. Stafford maybe a little bit less so than Goff, but both could be started over either rookie, for example. Like if you're a little worried about Jaden Daniels, I've seen him get pushed up to like QB7, so I don't know that you're necessarily starting him. Starting Stafford over Daniels, but over Caleb Williams, I think I'd start both these guys.
Very excited about this one. Sunday night game you want a piece of this game from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, and the running backs, so you're starting Kyron, you're starting Gibbs. Easy. Gibbs also, it came out that he said himself that he feels 98 to 100%. So take that for what you want, but I think that he's going to be out there. Maybe he gets a little bit less touch volume than we'd normally expect. I think that's fair. He hasn't been going 100% in practice. So trying to limit his reps just a little bit when you have somebody as good as David Montgomery behind him. And so leading into that, I think you can see where I'm going with Montgomery. Definitely, I would want to be starting David Montgomery this week as well.
Yeah, both good starts. And it will be interesting to see if, when, and how often Blake Corum gets onto the field and how many touches he gets. Because if it's a bigger role than people are anticipating, the fantasy community is going to be lighting on fire with how they drafted Kyron. So I'm excited to see that as well. Again, first game as a rookie, I'm not expecting much. And please don't start him. But he is someone that I think is worth being rostered.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point, too. I didn't even consider Quorum, but yeah, for start sit, definitely a sit this week.
Yeah.
At wide receiver, this game also very simple, right? You're starting Puka, you're starting Cup, you're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're sitting Jamison Williams. It's pretty simple, straight down the board there. And at tight end, right, Rams don't have anybody. Colby Parkinson, maybe a watch list type of player. And you're starting Sam Laporta with no reservations. He is off the injury report with that hamstring injury that he's been dealing with too during the offseason, and he's good to go. Last game we're going to talk about here, the Monday night game, Jets versus the Niners. SF 4.5-point favorites. That honestly is not as bad as you would think in general, right? I mean, the Jets are expected to be much improved, so I do understand the line here a little bit, but last year that would have been 10 or 12 at the end of the year, so seeing a better showing from the Jets is very much expected here. 43 over under. And the quarterbacks here, right, you have Aaron Rodgers and you have Brock Purdy. They're both definite starts in Superflex leagues. Aaron Rodgers, I say definite start, but if you went quarterback heavy, and you're in a little bit shallower league, and he's your third, maybe you don't end up starting him against a good Niners defense. But for the most part, I'm guessing Rodgers was drafted as a starter, and I'm not going to any of the tier 3 or the QB3 range for a starter here.
I think with Rodgers, if you took him as your second and then you quickly took like a Baker Mayfield or a Geno Smith, I would start either of those guys over Rodgers just based on how good San Francisco's defense is and playing on the road. But I'm really excited to see the improved offensive line because that was the big focal point of the Jets this offseason. Paid a lot of money. They spent draft picks. Like, keeping him upright is going to be the most important thing.
Yes, 100%. And in one quarterback leagues, I wouldn't start Rodgers, but Purdy, I think, is an interesting discussion. I've seen him pushed way down some of these rankings against a good Jets defense, but I still think if you drafted him as your starter, you're probably just going to go with him. I still think I prefer him over Baker for this week. So, that's an interesting discussion. I would play Goff over him, but other than that, I think I'm sticking with Purdy. For the running backs, this one's easy. Start Brees, start McCaffrey, 1 and 2 amongst running backs. No further discussion needed there, really.
Yeah, nothing to add on that. If you are Brees or McCaffrey owners, go ahead and pick up Braylon Allen and Jordan Mason just to protect your first round picks.
Yep. And then at wide receiver, again, this is very simple. You're starting Garrett Wilson, you're starting Brandon Ayuk, and you're starting Deebo Samuel.
I am a little worried about Ayuk this week, just based on the matchup. I've seen him push down quite a bit in rankings. Maybe he's in the doghouse a little bit. Maybe he's not up to speed just for how much time he's missed, but you're still starting him. I mean, it's Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, and he went off in week 1 last year. I know the circumstances were significantly different, but you don't want to miss a pop week from him if he does.
Too much.
If he is more ready to play. Yeah, if he is more ready to play than maybe we expect, and he's going to be going up against Sauce Gardner. So I think that is also kind of pushing his ranking down because that's going to be one of the featured wide receiver versus cornerback matchups that everybody's going to be watching. And Deebo, I think, is getting pushed way up because not only has he been in camp, he avoids that sort of coverage with Ayuk around. So I think that's kind of why you see the rankings the way they are. And then from a tight end perspective, you're definitely starting George Kittle this week. I'm very excited about him in this matchup. I think there could be a lot of room to work over the middle. And with Ayuk maybe still catching up to speed a little bit, there could be a little bit of a bump in targets for this game as well. And then Tyler Conklin, probably wasn't drafted in your league, probably on the waiver wire. But Rodgers does like his tight ends, so keep an eye on him.
Yep, I agree.
All right. And with that, we have completed the start sit and the game previews, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thanks so much.
Later.